Education certification course. Everyone in the auditorium can be seated. Welcome to all of you that are watching online. Thank you for joining us once again. We're going to be picking back up in our responsibility unit, which is the 5th of 5 in the junior high series. So hopefully, I know that we've got a lot of people that have been requesting the classes. So hopefully if you're watching this one or you're watching the live classes, please realize that this is part 5. Of what we're covering here. So there's a part 1, 2, 3, and 4 that's extremely necessary to go through to understand what's being brought here. In fact, we're going to reference some things back in the very first, as I referred to as part 1, which is the character unit. And this series, of course, is made up of 5 units, starting with the character unit, the acceptance, the self-control, the respect, and then the responsibility, which is what we're in right now. But each book builds one unit upon another, and it truly helps to create something that we have so that we can maintain. And we're going to be turning over in your books to page 95. We're going to go back to the lesson plan, but we're going to be in page 95 with what I have learned for chapter 5 tonight. But we're going to see that there's some things that are repeated, and then there's some things that are not repeated. There's some things that we need to have in our database, so to speak, in our memory, because it's important that we pull from it. And it's always important. And, of course, it becomes part of us. And that's how we pull from it, because the peaceful solution is something that's implemented into everyday life. And, of course, it helps you to remember the application of what it is that we're going through. If we're not using it, then it's really of no benefit to us. You know, it's like buying a tool, throwing it in the shed, buying a sewing machine for a lady and just throwing it in the closet. You can buy some of the best things, but if you don't put them to use, then they're of no benefit to you or to society in general. So, but the peaceful solution benefits you, of course. Yeah, you start with yourself. We learned that in the respect unit, very detailed about how respect and all of these things start with ourselves. And, of course, they'll go outwardly. Whenever we're applying these things to ourselves, then we can do it toward others. But if we disrespect ourselves, we're going to disrespect others. It's just part of what we're creating and allowing ourselves to become. And that's something very important to remember. As we learned in the character unit, there's some things we're born with. It's part of our genetic makeup. You know, your eye color, your hair color, skin color. All of these things are part of who we are, and you don't go through and change you can, if you want colored contacts, you can change eyes and dye your hair. But the way you're born with those things are pretty much, that's what we're born with, and that's what we have. You can alter them if you want to with what the technology of today has given us. But these are things that we're born with. But you're not born hating somebody. You're not born being disrespectful. You're not a born thief, and you're not a born leader. We all have to learn how to develop character, whether it's positive or negative. We go through life building our lack thereof. Whenever someone has a negative character, it's not that they tore down their positive character in the younger years. They didn't build it to tear it down. One time we had a campaign going, and someone had turned in that we should tell people, through our literature and through some of the flyers we were putting out, this is how you can get peace back into your life. And the author of the Peaceful Solution called, and he asked a few of us what we thought about it. And I kind of chuckled jokingly. I was like, I don't know how you get it back. I don't know if they ever had it to begin with. I didn't. I'm still trying to get it the first time. And he laughed. He goes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's hard to get something back you've never had into your life to begin with. You're just now getting it when you're becoming educated on how to do it. So it's hard to have something, get it back into our lives. We're just getting it. I'm still just getting it. I'm in a process of getting it. And all of us are. And learning is one part. The application is another. But they all have to go hand in hand. And, of course, we learn through repetition. And eventually, hopefully, we get it right. Well, looking here on page 95, just put your finger there for a quick second, because we're going to go back and read the procedures. That's very important when you're teaching this. You don't read the procedures to your classroom, but as a teacher, something we need to do. And, of course, if you were teaching this lesson plan, you would have, as a teacher, you would have already pre-read. We divide this up into 4 different teachers, but when we're teaching this, you read the whole chapter. And you do that by going through the other classes with the teachers. But when you're teaching it, you usually go back and reread it for yourself. It doesn't take a long time to do this. I mean, you're literally looking from page 77 to 95 is what we're looking at right now. So that's not an enormous amount of material just to prepare for what I have learned tonight. But here in Procedure 9, found on LP5D, and once again, this is a grade tabs page. If you flip it back over, you'll see it on the other side. Identifying that this is a teacher's manual and this is part of the lesson plan. The students' books, the ones that your students will have that you're teaching, will not have this information. Only you as teachers have this information. So here's Procedure 9. It's given instructions to the teacher so we can actually help our classroom bring this to a conclusion with Chapter 5. It says, conclude the lesson by re-emphasizing that self-control, discipline, and consistency are needed to maintain a responsible character and to develop a positive reputation. Have students turn to page 95 and read the section, What I Have Learned. Remind students of the importance of consistently making positive choices because one bad choice can affect them for the rest of their lives. And we've covered some things already, going back over to page 95. We've covered some things already in this chapter. You know, it's really important to also write down with this chapter, Chapter 6 of the Respect Unit, because they go hand in hand. They both talk about building a reputation. And there's other things that we learned even in the character unit where it talks about how our reputation precedes us, as we went through last class, and David covered that in a couple classes. Then I'll just show some brief things tonight to put back into our minds again. But looking over here to page 95 in the What I Have Learned section, and once again, each chapter of the junior high series ends with a What I Have Learned section. So every time you end, you will go through this, and of course the beginning of the next chapter always has us review the previous chapter because it's extremely important to keep putting these things in our mind through repetition. And the very first one here on page 95, it says, just like many things in life, a responsible character must be maintained. Now I want to draw this back to your memory. This was in the character unit on page 100, and I'll put it here in the overhead. Remainder of my slides that I never used last class. It says, keeping your character running smoothly, maintaining it every day by being prepared, and notice here, this is the key point, setting your mind in advance to do the right thing. So remember that part, setting your mind in advance. That's one of the keys. In fact, at the beginning of this book, or this chapter, we said the deciding factor. You know, that's part of the deciding factor, preparing our minds in advance. Now, it doesn't mean you can prepare your mind for everything that's coming your way. But if you set your mind to never steal anything, and you're constantly reminding yourself of every time you look at something, whether it be a pen, whether it be a book, a car, a house, always ask yourself, who owns this? Well, why do you need to ask yourself who owns it? Because if you're asking yourself who owns it, you need to answer the question. Do I own it or does someone else own it? If I own it, I get to set the rules for it. I can use it. If I don't own it, I have to ask permission to even touch it. You know, and some things to even look at it. I've heard people say, hey, can I look at that? And then you get permission. But make sure, because that's part of maintaining. That's all part of this maintenance program. And of course, if you've ever bought a car, I know we have mechanics sitting out here. I know they would love to get up here and talk about how often you should change your oil, you know. And I tell you what, I have a friend, very diligent teacher of the Peaceful Solution. I'll tell you how diligent this man was. I know he's watching right now. He was so diligent, he had the spark plugs changed every time he had the oil changed. And I told him, I said, don't do that. There's no need to do that. But he was like, oh, I just thought it'd make it run better. I thought that's what we needed to do. And, you know, I was like, well, at least you do it. I would rather you tell me that than you say, I've never had the spark plugs changed. So, you know, some people are very overzealous. And, of course, once he realized there's a certain time to do it, he's very diligent about doing it. But maintenance, not just for a car, but for everything. But one thing that you learn in life, if you don't take care of the things you own, you don't maintain your house, your car, your clothes, whatever it is you have, usually you're not in the habit of maintaining yourself. You know, it can be a look upon what's deeper inside, because the things you value, And I'm not saying you have to go out and wax your car every day, make sure it's shining and pretty and all of those things. No, I'm talking about operating conditions and doing things that must be done at the time it's required. Well, our character is also the same. And it starts with education. That's how we change the hearts and minds, is education. And of course, here, go back over to LP5A. This was the note to the teacher. Now, of course, this is not something you read to the student, but this was to prepare our mind on what we were supposed to offer to the children themselves. And at the very top of the page, it says, how does progress from developing the character trait of responsibility to being a responsible person? Well, what is the deciding factor? Well, notice here it says it's common knowledge that making a responsible decision once does not mean an individual is responsible. The decision to be accountable in all aspects of life must be done, notice, consistently over a period of time before one is considered responsible. One thing to keep in mind, we haven't got to it yet, but to keep in mind is that to be trusted is something you must earn. Well, being responsible also takes a period of time to prove that you are. And just for your notes, so you can write it down here, we covered the points about the deciding factor in the character unit on page 127. That's where we first talked about the deciding factor. And if you don't recall, you can write down page 80 for setting your mind in advance in the character unit. That's where we went over the details of how we literally prepare ourselves for the challenges that come on a daily basis. Continuing on here, though, it says, it is common knowledge that making a responsible decision once does not mean an individual is responsible. Once again, here it says, the decisions to be accountable in all aspects of life must be done consistently over a period of time before one is considered a responsible person. So it takes time. We're building, we're strengthening, like a muscle, so to speak. This is an important fact to teach children. It is vital that children understand that they cannot be inconsistent in making responsible decisions. For even one irresponsible choice can change the outcome of their lives. And of course, then we went over the concepts that are to be taught. And looking down to the last paragraph here, it says, so often we realize the importance of maintaining a responsible character after we have made choices we regret. And if you remember, we're going over hindsight is 20/20, or being able to, there's a lot of things I think if we all think about it, if we could go back 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and take the knowledge we have now and know the results of the decisions we made and think, man, I'd like to do it a little differently. Do you know what you would get to in the end without education? You would get back to the same point and go, can I do that again? I'd like to take what I messed up this time and go back and try to fix it. And without education, we'd continually be going back to the beginning and we'd always be breaking something. That's just the way it works when you're not educated, when we're not educated. But when we educate ourselves, and really we're learning from experience, that's not always the best one. We can learn from the experience of others too. That's what this book is full of, is experiences that others have been through. But the important part here, notice it says, as educators, parents, and role models, this is our opportunity to teach our children how to maintain a responsible character and avoid those things that can negatively affect their lives. So I hope everyone caught that. As educators, parents, and role models. So if you're a parent, that applies to you. If you're a role model, well, what is a role model? Could be a supervisor. Could be someone who plays a role in someone's life and they actually look up to them. I know role models tend to be, I remember Charles Barkley when I was growing up, and when he was playing in the NBA, and someone referred to him as a role model, and he caught a lot of backlash for this. His comment was, I'm not a role model, that's what your parents should be. He said, I do things every day you shouldn't do. And of course, it later came out, he was saying that after a basketball game, he would go to certain adult clubs and he would drop $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 a night. He said, if I'm your role model, I'm not the ideal role model. Man's still a multimillionaire, but I bet he would like to go back and have the things that he spent and the things that he did and redo that a little bit. Everybody learns. But parents should be role models, and notice it says teach our children how to maintain a responsible character. Well, how do you teach a child? How do you maintain being a responsible parent? Just think about that as we turn over here to page 77, because it all goes together. Is a parent responsible if they don't correct their child? And then, of course, how do you correct your child? Do you yell and scream and throw things at them, or do you re-educate them? Very important that everything is done properly. Because as a teacher in a school, you have to deal with these things. You have to deal with situations where children could be taught correctly. Children could be abused verbally. We talked about that in the second chapter of the character unit. That can be more harmful than physical abuse itself. At the very top of the page here in 77, being responsible is something you must practice and work at. Excuse me. Something we must practice and work at. And then here in the very beginning, most things in life need consistent care and attention in order for their value to be retained. So this consistent care and attention is needed. Think about it. Don't you have to take care of your belongings by treating them with care and putting them away after you use them to prevent them from being lost or damaged? You also have to take care of yourself. You just can't bathe once and be clean for the rest of your life. Nor can you clean your room once and have it remain clean for years to come. Consistently taking care of something in order to preserve its worth is called maintenance. We're talking about preserving the value of something, preserving its worth. You think about something that costs money. One of the greatest examples I've seen of this, and I'll get back into finishing this, a great example for young people, and I used to be the very same way. Whenever I got a pair of nice new shoes, for weeks I would go home and clean them, make sure every mark was gone off of them, everything was done. And I still don't know to this day what changed in my mind, but there came a certain point in my mind where I just totally destroyed them. And I don't know what changed from meticulously cleaning them and making sure, don't want any scratches on them, heaven forbid somebody step on them. But there come a time where I would just whole out destroy them and get them filthy and rip the bottoms off of them and do all kinds of crazy stuff with them. And I still haven't figured that one out. I know now, since I have to pay for my things, I try to wear shoes for a very long time because shoes seem to be expensive, very expensive. But once again, think about your character, our character. Individualize it, though, especially for your students. Have them think about it. What is something that's valuable to them? When you're young, it doesn't seem that important. And sadly, you don't see the importance until you get older. And you usually start realizing the repercussions of your actions when you start asking for something, when you start wanting a little freedom, when you want to be treated like an adult. There are young men that I know who are very responsible for their ages, and when they ask if they can do things, especially here in the Peaceful Solution, they're allowed to do things that I was never allowed to do growing up, and I didn't deserve to do them growing up. But then there's also people that can be the same age that will come ask, hey, can I do that too? Sorry, you can't. You have to go through the same training. You have to learn how to do something, whether it be running. Think about running a riding lawnmower, or running a chainsaw or something like that. That's a young man that you would have doing that. That's not something you'd have a 12-year-old doing. But think about things that you want to learn to do, and that's the key point. You want to learn to do it. Well, in doing all of these things, it's perfectly fine, but you still have to maintain your health and your ability to be able to do that job. There are a lot of people that do jobs today that at the end of the day, their body hurts, the body aches, the body's just got so many pains that they're coming and going. And of course, if you know what caused them, that's one of those, man, I'd like to go back and redo that. I'd sure like to have another shot at this, but sadly, there is not one restart button in life. We go through life and we have to learn to do the best we can with what we have, proving ourselves responsible so things can work out in the end. But here, To preserve its worth, it's called maintenance, and many things must be maintained. Notice from your hygiene to your clothes, the list is endless. The point is, if you want to keep anything functioning and looking its best, you must take care of it. Once again, it's important to take care of it. Now, some things age and they'll fall apart. We're one of them. You kind of get old and you fall apart. Sometimes what it feels like. But, we age. But that doesn't mean, when you get older, the hair can turn gray, the skin can get wrinkled, the joints can creak and pop. But it doesn't mean the character should be declining. The character should actually be getting better. We should actually, on a character standpoint, becoming a finely tuned machine. So character is something that our choices can actually keep causing it to be better, or they can tear it down very quickly. But the maintenance, once again, is based on our choices, setting our mind in advance. Also here it says in the next paragraph, it's the last paragraph, a responsible character, like so many other things in life, must be maintained. For it, too, requires care. If you drop your guard and allow yourself to be pressured into doing something that is wrong, you could end up embarrassing yourself, disappointing your parents, or worse. And then here, the very last sentence of the paragraph, it says, by paying attention to the choices you make. If you didn't underline that when it was first covered, underline that, because that's the key point. Paying attention to the choices we make, setting our mind in advance on what we're going to do. So paying attention to the choices we make, and avoiding those decisions that can negatively change the course of your life, you are working to maintain your responsible character. So it's, in a nutshell, that's it. That's what we need to do to maintain our responsible character. So looking back over here to page 95, we want to cover the second point. It's entitled, When I Apply Self-Control, Consistency, and Discipline to My Decisions and Actions, I Can Maintain a Responsible Character. That ties right in with what we just read on doing this on a daily basis. But looking back over to page 78, and once again, if you haven't been through the other 4 units, there is so much information that we've covered thus far in building up to this point, and it would be very helpful for you to go through those things. But at the very top of the page, on page 78 here, you see maintaining a responsible character, and it shows the example of baking a cake. And of course, if you've never, I'll tell you something that I used to love growing up, and I could eat it all the time. It was a bread my grandmother made, and she had a recipe, and it was called unleavened bread. Very simple recipe. And I loved that stuff. I would eat it every day, all year long if I could. And I did eat it almost every day, all year long. But if you left salt out of the very basic ingredients, I think there was only like 3 or 4 ingredients. Very simple. If you left salt out, that was the nastiest stuff on the face of the earth. You couldn't stomach to eat it. And I was amazed. That's when I learned that, salt's pretty important to the way things taste. I didn't realize how salt can be important to your health too. But I couldn't, you couldn't eat it. It would just get thrown away. In fact, it got to where if it got baked and realized, I forgot to put salt in it, just get thrown out the door. Nobody was going to eat it. Not even the dog would eat it. It's just nobody's going to eat that stuff. But when you bake a cake or anything you do, just leave it out. One thing is so simple, very simple. And salt's plenteous on the earth, so you can have a lot of something, but if you don't put it into what's needed, you're not going to get the results that's desirable. And it's the same thing for our character. You can have positive choices all around you. You can have education going on all around you. Many people I know go to colleges all of the time and they sleep through the classes. They don't pay attention to classes. They do what they can do. If they have to do a report, they get the cliff notes, or they pay people to do other things. And then when the exam comes, they hope for the best. They'll stay awake for 3 and 4 days trying to cram to get it all in. But that's not what we get. That won't work with our character. You can't cram 3 or 4 days. People usually start cramming for their character exam when they have a court date. That's when they start cramming for the character exam. And it's really, they try to hire a lawyer that can explain away why they made a bad choice. And that's really not going to help society whatsoever. But here it says the main ingredient, notice, is self-control. And if you remember in the self-control unit, it's on pages 4 and page 10. both pages tells us and reminds us that self-control is the foundation to building a positive character. So very important that you remember that it is the foundation. Without self-control, we have nothing to build upon. It's just like respect. If we don't respect ourselves, we're not going to respect someone else. But here it says in the previous chapters, you learned that by practicing self-control, which is the ability to stop, think, weigh the consequences of your actions, you can make responsible choices. Of course, we proceed with the right choice. And if you remember the STOP sign and the STOP acronym, to stop, think, consider your options, and then proceed. You know, it probably helps you better if you remind yourself, consider the consequences of your choices. Because none of us wants a consequence. Everybody always wants a reward. You want the results of doing what is right. Continuing on here, it says self-control can be used to maintain your positive character as well. So it's an important part of this maintenance program. In fact, self-control is to responsibility as a foundation is to a house. Well, why is that? Responsibility is a positive character trait, and all positive character is built upon the foundation of it is self-control. If someone lacks self-control, he or she will not make responsible choices. When it comes to maintaining your positive character, you have to consistently be on guard to stop and think carefully before making decisions that will cause moral dilemmas. And just for the fact that we're going to get into, let's read a little bit further to cover something else. When situations arise that you know your parents' guardians would not approve, notice you know they wouldn't approve, so that means you're educated already. You already know what's right and wrong. This didn't sneak up on you. Stop and consider the consequences of your actions. Never rush into following the crowd, which could consist of one person or many. The point is, don't make a decision without thinking about the consequences just because others are doing it. You know, do something just because everyone else seems like they're doing something. You know, and we call that impulsive, making impulsive decisions. And if you could write down there beside of that, page 50, because if that's page 50 of the responsibility unit, and that's where we have the definition and where we explain what it means to act impulsively. And on page 50, we said, we explain, let's take a closer look. We're talking about our character. We're examining our choices. Will this cause me any regrets? Just one bad choice can change your life forever. Avoid acting impulsively. That is without thought of the consequences. It doesn't mean you wouldn't thinking without thought of the consequences. Do not just do something because everyone else is doing it. Stop, think about your life, future, and goals. Once again, how will they be affected? How will your life, your future, and your goals be affected? So once again, all of these things tying together. And then looking over to, I think we want to cover some stuff on looking over to page 79, C is for consistent. To be consistent is to think and act in the same manner all of the time. Consistency is another important trait in maintaining a responsible character. Now, of course, you want to be consistent in doing what is positive. You don't want to be consistent in doing what is negative. When you go into a store, you want to consistently pay for the things you want. You don't want to go in and consistently steal the things that you want. You pay for them. You know, when someone asks, and this is a hard one. This is the absolute hardest one, I think. When you're being corrected for something you know that is wrong, we need to accept correction because all of us need correction. But when we know it's wrong and we try to stand up for what is wrong, that's when we fall short. That's when we start tearing our character down. That's when we start showing that, kind of like that diet program I was telling you about last class, the way they advertise it is you can cheat a little. You know, well, in building positive character, you can't cheat a little. You know, and I'm still amazed that somebody tells you can cheat and get what you want in life. It just don't seem right. Needless to say, if I was going to use something like that, that is something that I would not use. How did it work for you? Well, I got to cheat a little. It made my life better. It just that can never work. Never work. Continuing on, it says in the second paragraph, just how important is it to be consistent? Well, consider what it would be like if your parents and guardians only fed you once in a while and you didn't know when you would get your next meal. Sadly, there are many children who face this reality and live every day not knowing if or when they will be cared for. And that's just an example. I know here at the Peaceful Solution headquarters, it's not allowed to not have a meal. If you don't have food, they give you food. You can go to a cafeteria and they'll give you food. No one here goes hungry. That's always been, when you come here for education, you have to have the food in your body, and you have to have the proper food in your body to help your body operate, to help your mind think well. And that's what we're here doing, to get an education. But, we've seen in presentations given before through many of the teachers in the Peaceful Solution. Here recently, it was in the news where they're fixing mud pies, and they'll put a little bit of sugar, a little bit of cinnamon in mud pies in Haiti just to have something to eat. We've seen that take place overseas, But you also have these, you're talking about maintaining positive character, and I'm not going to mention any organizations, but they'll come on TV, and they only do it a certain time of year. I guess the rest of the time, I don't know what takes place with these poor people. I remember growing up, and everybody came together. It was in like 1985 or 1986. Multi-millionaires came together, and they sang a song about how we are the world. And I remember some of the lyrics that, there are children dying and people crying. And I thought, and they can sing this song and continue to die and cry. And it was supposed to be this big thing. It was going to make a change, and it was going to change and feed everybody that needed food, especially those in Africa. That was, 40 years ago? And it's still going on to this day. And they've redone that song again for Haiti. And if you haven't seen what's going on in Haiti recently, that song didn't help them much either. But they redid it, I guess about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Talking about a problem doesn't fix it. It takes action. There are many people that want to talk about problems, how bad society is, how someone should do something, and not do a thing themselves. Well, what is the first thing that we should do? That's a question for you. What is the first thing you should do? Well, you're all doing it. And those of you online are doing it. We're in class, we're learning. We're learning how to do it. That's something we do as teachers. That's why it's so extremely important to get every class, to watch every class, because we're always learning. Somebody offers something different. We could take anybody sitting in this auditorium and give them time to teach up here, and I guarantee we'd all learn something from each and every person. Something that makes sense. The way he said it, the way he explained it, because we all have different experiences. We've all had different things we've had to learn from, different backgrounds we've come from. Some people have come from ideology, of lives. Mom, dad, had a house and had 3 meals a day. Some people come from where there was a mom or there was a dad, or their grandparent raised them, or they're raised in an orphanage. There's just so many walks of life. And a lot of people that join the Peaceful Solution are people that grew up in prisons because they made a bad choice or because they were not educated enough to make a right choice. That's a question you should consider, especially before we start condemning others. But continuing on here, look down to it's about discipline. And it says to be disciplined is to follow a specific pattern of behavior until it becomes a habit and a normal part of the way you behave. That should draw your mind back to becoming a VIP, which is around pages 73 in the character unit, where we learned how doing these things repeatedly over time help us to develop a habit. And that's what they have to become. You can have a bad habit, but that bad habit didn't start, overnight. It took a lot of practice. You have to work pretty hard to have a bad habit. Same thing with having a great habit or a positive habit. It works the same way. Becoming disciplined requires both self-control and being consistent. So if you want to become disciplined, you need those two ingredients. If you want the result of discipline, you have to be working to develop self-control and being consistent. In what ways are you already disciplined? Well, you can examine yourself there. But looking down to the next paragraph, it says, in addition to disciplining yourself to be courteous, there are many other things you can do to become disciplined. And looking down to, let's go ahead and read it. For instance, going to bed at a certain time every night and waking up at a specific time every morning is discipline. And that's something I'm still learning to do. you don't realize how much you should do that until you don't do it for many years, and then you get these other things where your body says, hey, you neglected me here. And you learn, I guess sleeping 4 hours a night doesn't work after all. I thought it did. I've done it all these years. You start thinking, it seems to go fine. And then your body lets you know that, no, what you did, you got by with it, but now you can't do it anymore. You got to change. And it's important because we have to discipline ourselves to realize there's certain things we have to do. Notice it says here, scheduling a study time and studying every day at that time also takes discipline. And I know a lot of people like doing it first thing in the morning. It helps get your mind set for the day. It's easy to become disciplined, but no, is it easy to become disciplined? No, it's not. Once again, this is where developing self-control is very important, because to become disciplined, you must consider the advantages and benefits of what you need to do. Then you must do it consistently, notice, until it becomes a habit. And of course, we say practice, practice, practice. So with that in mind, looking back over here to page 95, we talked about how the self-control, the consistency, and the discipline to make our decisions and our actions help us maintain a responsible character. Now let's look to the third one. It says, when people do not maintain a responsible character, one irresponsible choice could negatively affect them for life. And looking over to page 83, and we have quite a few examples, and there's other things that you could cover also in the bullet point we just read, just for time allowance to make sure we get through it. We're going to go ahead and go to page 83. But notice life on the flip side. And at the very bottom, you see here, one time is too many. One time is too many. So with that, look back up to the top here. It says, when people do not maintain a responsible character, the results can be disastrous. Spur-of-the-moment decisions made without considering whether they are moral or immoral, right or wrong, can leave you up a creek without a paddle. Very challenging one to read where I grew up. But you'll be up a creek without a paddle. But once again, remember page 50, if you don't have it written there, impulsive decisions. And remember what we read. Let me read it one more time because it's important to remember this. Impulsive, that is without thought of the consequences. It's not without thought, but without thought of the consequences. So once again, reading this again, when people do not maintain a responsible character, the results can be disastrous. Spur-of-the-moment decisions made without considering whether they are moral or immoral, right or wrong, can leave you up a creek without a paddle. And then right below that, you see here, a person lacking self-control, discipline, and consistency is likely to make irresponsible choices that can lead to embarrassment, danger, or worse. And then you see here we had the example of Henry. And of course, if you remember, we read this last class. Henry was, lost his job. But instead of going in and getting another job, he decided he was going to rob a convenience store. And as he was standing in front of the judge being sentenced, the judge, giving him his sentence, asked him if he had any final words. And of course, he told the judge that he's always kept the law. He only did it this one time. And remember, the quote from the judge is, one time is all it took for you to become a thief. So think about that. One time is all it took for him to become a thief. And of course, also on page 84, at the very top of the page, it says, it is a fact that in our society, making even one irresponsible choice could change the outcome of life, especially your life. And that's what we're looking at. I heard a statistic the other day, and I thought this was the most amazing statistic I've ever heard. And it's based on decision making, but it's not based on examples. But it said that if a person lives to be 80 years of age, on average, 85% of those people would have done something that cost someone else their life during that time period and not even known it. And they usually refer to it as driving or doing something that was irresponsible and something they never even noticed. They also said it could be saying something that demoralized someone, leading to a suicide or to a drug addiction that later caused a death. And you start looking at it that way, of course, we're actually teaching every day. And if we do something that leads someone to taking up a bad habit and not maintaining, being responsible, being these positive role models, and not maintaining our positive character, and we do things that are negative, and we teach others to do it, and that actually leads to their demise, well, that's a very sad thing, but it's also a very definite thing. So think about that as not only is this affecting ourselves, we shouldn't be selfish in that. Think about how we also affect others and how all that person has to do is one time and they can't go, but I've seen so-and-so do that 100 times. Well, so-and-so didn't get caught, but so-and-so will have to, everything comes around. I know people in the world call it karma. That's what comes around goes around. It's actually, you have to eventually answer for your bad choices. It's very simple. It's not that what goes around comes around. It's everyone who makes bad choices will have to answer for them eventually in life, whether it be through health or through other means. You have to answer for it. So going back here, and of course you also have over to the right-hand side on page 85, you have a poem that you can read. And let's read the very bottom of that page, though. It says, not maintaining a responsible character is like playing in traffic. It can be dangerous and unpredictable. Not to mention it's also illegal and extremely foolish. It's nothing to play with. Going back here to page 95, and we're on the fourth point now, and it says, when I focus on maintaining a responsible character, I reduce the opportunity to make mistakes that could change the outcome of my life. And that's what we want to do. We want to reduce anything that could cause us harm or, damage, destroy us. It's very important that we examine each and everything that we do. In fact, we'll go page 88, looking at the very top of the page. It says, does maintaining a responsible character mean I can never make a mistake? We haven't got too deep into what a mistake is yet, but of course, a mistake is not giving your child a cell phone so they can play video games. That's a bad choice. That's just that simple. If you give your child something with free internet on it and expect them to make right choices without teaching them, you've made a really bad choice. And I can sit here and list a lot of things that account for that. But here it says, being in complete control of your thoughts, considering the decisions you must make, and weighing the consequences of your actions, you can avoid many of the so-called mistakes people make in life. One of the reasons why people make poor choices is because they think the only way to learn about something is to experience it. And that's, have you ever heard the saying, experience is the best teacher? I had a younger brother one time that he was using a saw. Still don't know how he did it, because he's right-handed. Somehow he did it I'm impressed with how he did it. But he cut off a finger, and I use saws all of the time. And furniture making is part of what I do, And I'm sure he would love to go back and redo what he did, because he had a lot of problems after he did that and had to have part of his finger removed. But when you think about it, I didn't really need to see him go through that, or anyone else that I know closely go through cutting something off, to know I probably shouldn't do that. And there's other things that you can see in life. When things occur to you with people you're close to or you grew up with, things like that, that affects you a little bit more. And we've talked about that. We need to get to where all of society affects us the same way. If we see somebody suffer, we need to do our part into fixing that. And there's a lot of suffering going on in society right now that people are defining as mistakes, but they're not mistakes. They're bad choices. But notice here it also says the fact is experience can be the worst way to learn a lesson. So experience can be the worst way to learn a lesson. For example, we shouldn't have to experience taking an addictive drug to know that it is addictive. The testimonies of life experiences of the countless people who have become addicted to the same drug should be enough proof. In like manner, you shouldn't have to get your hands burned to know the fire is hot. That's pretty common going up, people saying that. You're going to get yourself burned and then you'll learn. Well, what do people do? Well, they look for the magical pill. What do you have that can fix my burns? Well, okay, and do you have something I can use so when I go to get burned again, I can get protected from being burned? Because I plan on doing it again, by the way. You know, it's really nothing learned in that lesson. So it's not a mistake. It's just a really bad choice. Is there any way to recover from making an irresponsible choice? Once again, we get to impulsively. Sometimes people act impulsively, and this is at the bottom of the page. That means they act without carefully thinking about the consequences of their actions, or they think if they experiment with some risky behavior, they won't be affected. You know, and that's one of the, I don't want to, call a person a fool, but that's one of the most ignorant things somebody can do is think, I think I'll try this fentanyl. Or I think I'll try this. I'll try that. I see thousands of people are dying. They're just not responsible drug users. Well, first of all, what is a responsible drug user? A responsible drug user doesn't even exist because you have to be irresponsible to be a drug user to begin with. So the whole ideology of, and I've heard people tell me this, don't worry about me. I'm a responsible drug user. I don't share needles. Oh, okay. Well, didn't know that existed. That's some things make you shake your head, But looking over here to page 89, the very bottom of the page, it says some irresponsible choices can affect you for the rest of your life because the consequences of some decisions are irreversible. And then, of course, we have some examples here. One, if someone dares you to ride your bike down a steep hill and you fall and damage your spine, you could be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. Experimenting with drugs can cause death on the first try, and engaging in premarital sex can lead to pregnancy or an incurable disease the very first time. Don't risk your health or your life to experiment or experience things you know are risky. If bad things can occur to others who take risk with their lives, recognize that it can also occur to you. So looking over back to page 95, and the next bullet point we're going to go through here is, I must also maintain responsible interaction with others. This means not doing or saying anything to intentionally disrespect another person. Look over to page 86 first. Page 86, you see here, it's about people too. And that's one thing that we're never going to get away from. We're always going to have interaction with other people. You could put yourself on a remote island and you could try that, or you could talk to someone that's been put in solitary confinement over a period of time. Scientific studies show that not having human interaction will literally destroy the brain. The brain can either continually grow or it can start losing. It's like a muscle. You have to work with it. And if you don't have human interaction, it actually can reduce your ability to actually communicate, to see value in other people. You can become very self-centered. I'm not saying that people that have went through this can't change, but if you talk to people that's been in solitary confinement for a long time, they'll tell you it's not an easy thing. In fact, it's hard. You have to do something. In fact, I know someone told me they read a lot of books and that helped them feel like they were interacting. They put themselves into the book and they felt like that was part of them in the book, and that's how they did the human interaction in their mind. Even though it was fictitious, that's how they kept maintaining it. It was a challenge, but they said they were able to do it. But once again here, it says you must also maintain responsible interaction with others. This means not doing or saying anything to intentionally disrespect another person. Consistently treating someone with kindness, respect, and compassion means considering how you would want to be treated if you were in that individual's shoes. Sometimes people say or do things that frustrates, upsets, or annoys us. Regardless of how frustrating or angry you are with someone, you must maintain self-control. Once again, those things are easier said than done, but that's not an excuse to lose self-control. It's not an excuse to disrespect someone. You do not have the right to curse at, hit, or disrespect at a person in any way. Think about it. If you don't have self-control and the other person also lacks self-control, you could have a bona fide fight on your hands. Fighting is a lose-lose situation. Boy, you wouldn't know that by watching the news today, would you? No one wins. No one wins a war. No one wins a fight. The one who throws the hardest punch only proves physical strength, not intelligence. Or the one who drops the biggest bomb only creates a greater disaster for all of us than the one with the smaller bomb. But look down here. Here are some other ways that you can maintain interaction with others. The only reason I say that, and I say it tongue-in-cheek, is you can see in society right now why it's so important for our children to get this information into their hearts and minds. We have a generation right now making decisions on a global scale that didn't get this into their hearts and minds. And the answer for fixing a problem is dropping bombs. As one senator said, to fix Gaza, we just need to drop a nuclear bomb. That'll fix it all. Done. No more money spent. Cheap situation, a cheap resolution to it. There we go. Done. Well, if you drop a bomb or you shoot at your friend, what are they going to do? Not even your friend, your enemy. You shoot at your enemy, what are they going to do? They're buddies, The enemy of my enemy is my friend. They're going to shoot back at you. Well, am I really saying that you mean making decisions as a child, being this simplistic, could lead to making decisions like that on a global scale? Well, how else are they made? Explain that. You make decisions based on what you're taught. And when people say that, we have to fight this war and we got to win it, who has ever really won a war? Think about it. Go back through history, especially history teachers. Go back. Who ever won a war? And I know people say, well, we fought the War of 1812 and we took control, or, here in America, we even had the Civil War. Well, who won? Well, I don't know. We're still fighting with each other. It's continual. It never stopped. And taking somebody else's land, does that solve a problem? No, it doesn't solve a problem. But here are some other ways you can maintain your responsible interaction with others. Don't be rude just because you're in a bad mood. Once again, get bitten by the love bug. Remember, don't touch anyone in a sexual way. We're talking about people who don't have anyone there to do that with. You're talking about going and doing something outside of a proper relationship. Bite your tongue before you gossip or spread rumors about someone. If we all had scars in our tongues where we did that, everyone sitting here would have scars. I mean, my tongue would probably be chewed off probably. It's part of a learning process, but you see how bad those decisions are. We only have, 10 minutes left, so we need to get through these last three. If you go back to page 95, it says, my reputation precedes me. If I earn a negative reputation by being irresponsible in my choices and actions, I can disqualify myself from many opportunities and friendships. And of course, everything is going to be found here on pages 90 and 91 for the last three. But I also want you to remember that chapter 6 of the respect unit also covers this parts about reputation. Also, let me give you here page 90, but I want to show you. Then the character unit, this is the same thing we covered. That's just a copy of the page itself, the top part. But we also covered your reputation precedes you, page 90 of the character unit. And that's for your notes. So you'll have in your notes, so when you go back through, you can remember. I can get information from chapter 6 of the respect unit. I can also get more information back in the character unit. And you're just putting these things back together. We're rehearsing what we've learned through repetition. But of course, here with my reputation precedes me, we look back over here to page 90, and the first thing we learn here at the very top of the page is when you're responsible and maintain your moral character, you earn a positive reputation. Important we know what the definition of a reputation is. It's how you are known or perceived by others. Your reputation can be positive or negative. It is based upon whether or not you maintain a responsible character. Often a person's reputation can be summed up in simple statements such as, you can trust him, he won't let you down. Or, she is dependable. I trusted her. I would trust her with my life. On the other hand, it could be summed up with statements like, don't leave your bag open when he's around, or I wouldn't trust her if she was the last person on earth. And you start thinking about how these things are broken down and how you disqualify. It's because of not, once again, having the self-control and consistency which help develop the discipline for being a responsible person. Also look at the next paragraph, and it says, have you ever met someone, and after you were introduced to that person, said, I've heard a lot about you. Does it make you nervous? Do you wonder what they've heard? People can hear about you and form opinions about your character long before they meet you. And make sure you re-emphasize to your students it doesn't mean what they've heard is true. There's a lot of gossip, slander, as we just spoke about, can be said about people and it not necessarily be true. I think the one that I've seen go through that more than anyone is the author of The Peaceful Solution, a man who dedicated his whole life to providing a work free of charge to society and was ridiculed because he spoke against topics that a lot of people don't like people speaking against. They want to make money off of them, such as abortion. So he got a lot of ridicule for standing up for what is right, and he didn't back down. And it's something that is a great example for the rest of us. Well, notice here in the next paragraph, it says, here is a simple fact of life. If you make irresponsible decisions, you can earn a negative reputation. Often someone with a negative reputation is treated with contempt or scorn. In other words, people won't hide the fact that they dislike that individual. For example, if you have earned the reputation of being a gossiper, that means you worked hard at it, right? When you earn something, you had to work for it. This is something you shouldn't be working for. We shouldn't be working for. You will find that conversation will stop when you enter the room and no one will tell you anything that matters to them. A negative reputation can cause one to lose friendship and opportunities. So once again, you can lose a lot by doing such things. And then going back to page 95, this is the second to the last one. It says, by maintaining a responsible character, I can earn the reputation of being honest and dependable. So once again, remember the ingredients to that, having self-control and consistency. So here at the very top it says on page 91, if you've ever made some irresponsible choices and now have a bad reputation, then begin right now to start changing the way you think and act. Earlier in the chapter, you learned how to recover when you've made a bad choice. Use those same steps to change your character and your reputation. Your reputation won't change overnight, and it might take some time before others realize that you're trying to change. In the meantime, don't get discouraged if no one notices the new you right away. Notice you must be determined to apply self-control and discipline to be a responsible person, because it is the right thing to do and not just to get others to notice. Your acts of kindness and dependability must be demonstrated over a period of time before you are recognized as being responsible in those areas. So once again, you have to work hard and develop these things. But also looking at the very last paragraph, it says the reward of having a responsible character can follow you into adulthood. Having a responsible character can help you to be honest in business dealings, fair and respectful to others, so continue to build and maintain a responsible character. And I actually think I jumped ahead on that one. If you look up to the paragraph before that, that's the one I should have read. A positive reputation opens the doors to many opportunities and rewards. A responsible person is respected and admired by peers, parents, and teachers. Can you imagine being given a position of leadership without asking for them? This occurs when you have a reputation for being responsible. People are glad to know that there are those that they can trust to follow instructions, to be trustful and truthful, to be truthful and dependable. Truthful and dependable. And then going back over to page 95 real quick, the very last one, which I've already read it, but we'll read it again. It says, responsible people are trusted to follow instructions, fulfill their obligations, and treat others with respect. You can see that there at the very bottom. It talks about the rewards of having it. And then at the very bottom of the page, it says, it takes many responsible acts to build a responsible reputation and only one bad decision to tear it down. So tying it all together. But basically, you'll find here on page 91 the rewards of having this positive character and the rewards of doing what's right by developing a responsible character. And then back on page 95, we see here at the very bottom of the page, it's easier to build a responsible reputation than to fix an irresponsible one. So I want you to consider these things. And of course, we're going to be able to move on to chapter 6. I'm sure William will do a brief review of chapter 5, but chapter 6, we're going to be talking about responsibility and society. And really, responsibility, we should never get so self-centered. It's only about us, but it does start with us. Each and every individual has their character and their ability to develop that positive character starts within themselves, but we're going to start talking about how it connects and interacts with society, and how some choices are just, you just can't undo them. Once they're done, they're done. Sometimes they alter society in a great scale. So we're going to stop right there. So we'll pick up next class on lesson plan 6, page A, beginning the chapter. And the next class will be the 28th of this month, so April 28th at 5:30, and William will be our teacher. So thank you once again for joining us.